Hi.
Hey, good morning.
Morning. Welcome to today's Coffee and Connection.
Great to see you. Happy to be connecting with you.
Happy to be coffeeing with you.
We all know that's not coffee in that mug.
Yeah, but you never know what it is. It might be different every time. You never know.
It's a mystery.
It's delicious, whatever it is. Uh,
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. We're getting settled in here in the new house, as you can tell by the background being exactly the same. Thank you, Zoom, for
Right,
the background.
right.
But
It looks so authentic.
we're in this really weird space of trying to live in this house knowing that we're not going to live here for a very long time. So like certain things we want to unpack, certain things we don't want to unpack. But here's the very strange thing is that the previous tenants or owners, people who lived here prior, weren't the cleanest people. And when they moved out, they had it cleaned. When we moved in, we had it cleaned. And still, like, we're just fine. Like, all the cabinets are just kind of icky. And so, like, we're like not putting our stuff in the cabinets until we can like clean them again. It's this weird, we can't quite unpack, but we need to unpack, but we don't really want to unpack. And so it's like a lot of just kind of, it's just kind of bubbling around there. So other than that, the pool's fantastic. And we've spent every single day in the pool here for the last week and a half, which is nice.
Yep, that's a game changer. I
Oh,
tell you what that is. Especially with kids, even without kids, that's a game changer of
mhm.
just an asset to have around for relaxation purposes. But with kids especially,
Oh,
oh man,
it's so
that's
great.
that's a beautiful, beautiful
Oh,
thing.
and the best thing is it's a really wonderful reward. Like if you do all your chores and if you do all your homework, we can go swimming. And like, okay.
Right? So great. So
Yeah.
great. All right, do you find that you're able to get that same joy that your kids are
Oh,
experiencing out of the pool?
I'm certain that I get more joy out of the pool than the kids do,
Awesome.
because growing up, I went to a lot of day camps over the summer, and one of the day camps I went to a lot was from 1 to 3 every single day was pool time. And they had this big community pool, and so me and all my best friends, like we just got really good at pooling, like jumping in and making big splashes, and learning how to splash each other, and all these really cool pool games. And so now that this is the first house I've ever had that has a pool. Now I'm like teaching all my kids all these really cool pool games, like hold your breath and go underwater, but then like blow out the bubbles and you sink and then like come back. It's just like all these fun things. And when Jamie's not in the pool, I try to splash her. So I'm like, oh, you're across the pool, I can splash you. Watch. Boy, it's so
Right. So her joy experience may be
maybe a
different
little different, a little different.
a little bit.
How are you doing?
That's hilarious. To be 100% honest, not my best week.
Mm, mm.
Not and not even like not my best week by like a little bit, but like not my best week by a large margin.
Yeah, what's going on?
And so it just, you use the term bubbling up, like stuff's bubbling up around you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like stuff has piled up around me and like is caving in on all sides.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Like if you like, the visual I get is like, have you ever seen hoarders? And some of the houses, like people hoard like stacks of newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
and there are all these like precarious piles of like newspaper and magazines and stuff like that. I have this vision of like all these little stresses that by themselves haven't been very big, or like even little annoyances, which it feels very like shallow to say some of this, but it's given our topic this week, I'm going to go ahead and put it out there, where I feel like they've just been piling up, and in and of themselves are not a big deal, but layered and layered and layered, now they're like the piles are too tall and they're starting to tip.
Yeah.
So even though I'm making great progress and I'm producing things that need to be produced, and like we're actually making, we might actually get the garage cleaned out sometime in the foreseeable future of 2020. Like I'm going to give myself until December just in case we need it. But I feel like what's come to my attention is I haven't really like dealt with all of the little things
Mm.
I've taken a strategy where it's like, yep, that's something I need to deal with. Like, put it in the pile, put it in the pile, put it in the pile, put it in the pile. And now the piles are too big.
Yeah.
So the cool thing is it's an awesome opportunity to start working on it.
Yeah.
The challenging thing is it doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
And that's kind of taken a toll on my, my personal capacity. It's taken a toll on my professional capacity, in terms of, you know, the amount of work, which is wonderful to have, any amount of work right now.
Right.
I'm very grateful for that, but it definitely does mean, some different strategies are in place. And it was a real call. It's actually what made me suggest the topic for this week.
Yeah.
It was a real call for authenticity, to myself, and then also with the people around me, where I've seen some of the ways that I've responded or reacted lately. And I was like, oh yeah, that probably caught them off guard, because I've been like not telling, you know, Sean, that this is building, or I haven't reached out to my friends in recent history and said, hey, do you have a minute? So yeah, so way longer answer than you probably wanted, but usually that's your job at the beginning of these broadcasts. I'm just gonna steal that role from you. So yeah, but as a perfect lead in to this week's topic of authenticity, and what we mean when we talk about that, and why it's important to talk about it, and then even strategies for doing it, not just on the personal side, but at work too.
So I want to ask you how it has been to kind of open up to that, kind of open up to yourself and open up to the people around you. But before I ask that, can you describe what you mean when you say authenticity?
Yeah. So authenticity to me is no veneer.
Mm.
Like, no, sugarcoating is not the right word, but like a lot of times when we operate in the context with other people, we interact in a way that we're trying to meet our perception of what they want from us.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, in the case of work, like, we need to behave in a certain way that meets an expectation of somebody. On the personal side, for me, the no veneer means just being real. And I know you have a take on that word, but like cutting your own internal BS and being able to say, you know what, I actually feel really great about this, even though people around me are kind of struggling or falling apart. Or what I really want to offer my family is I've got it all together and I'm confident and I feel good. And today I just feel kind of crummy. And so for me, when I say authentic, that's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah. So I feel the same about it as far as definition goes. One thing that always trips me up is just the principle of perception and reality. So we talk about being real, but the interesting thing is that when we're being real, they're perceiving our behaviors, and they're basing all of their behaviors on what they perceive our behaviors are. And so, you know, when I think about this, the benefits of authenticity is when we are behaving or acting as our authentic selves, without the veneer. It increases the likelihood that they're going to perceive what we're trying to communicate. So when we're communicating authentically, it lessens the likelihood that they're going to misinterpret something, or if they do misinterpret something, it's very easy to come back to it. And what I mean by that is, if we are trying to project some aura, some way of being, we're trying to put some veneer on and make them feel something, and it doesn't hit them where it's supposed to, and they come back and say, well, what did you mean by that? Well, if we're putting on airs, or we're pretending, or in some way making something extra, we have to kind of keep a running tally of all of those extra things that we've done to restate them for them. Almost like when you tell a white lie and you have to go back and you have to remember the white lie that you told to retell it. Well, if you're being your authentic self, when you need to come back and restate it or retell it, it's much easier because it's your authentic self. It's the authentic communication. And that's something I think a lot about with perception and reality and authenticity and interpretation. It's so much easier long term to be authentic. It's so much harder in the near term to be authentic because we have this image of ourselves, and we believe that other people have an image of us as well. And so I know you're a connector. You're the type of person that brings people together. And I know just from talking to people kind of around you and in your orbit that everyone thinks that you have everything together all the time. Like you have it together.
It's good. I want to share a visual with you that I used on a webinar this week after you're done. Now that I've totally interrupted.
No, go ahead. I'll come back to you being perfect in a minute. Don't worry.
Okay, good. I love that topic. I did a webinar yesterday on fear, and it was on using the strategy of reframing as a way to move past areas of resistance, areas of friction. And I found this amazing meme, thank you, internet, that is Wonder Woman, and she's like flat out, eyes closed on like this deck or a sidewalk or whatever it is, and it says, "It's fine. It's all fine. I have everything handled." And then it's got like her laid out, and then at the bottom it says, "Everything is fine." And that's what I feel is the challenge of authenticity, right? Is that we do want people to feel like we're fine because they want that. They want us to be fine. I want you to be fine. I want me to be fine. But how do we live in that space where we can authentically share that, but not be so swept away by it that that's the only place we live, or that it overwhelms or takes over, dominates more than it needs to, like more than it's a sort of appropriate space. So, but I love that visual of like Wonder Woman just like laid flat out. It's fine. I've got everything handled.
It's fine. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I remember a couple of times, and I think I've shared this on one of our Coffee and Connections, this moment when you were still in Surprise, and you were assistant city manager of Surprise, and we were launching Surprise Women Leading Government. And I was there to help facilitate the conversation, the planning meetings, and you were there to kick off the whole shebang. And you came in with a sheet of paper, and you said, I had full intention to memorize and rehearse my remarks and deliver them with verve, but there's a lot of things going on in the house. We've got this going on, that going on, this going on, that going on, and I didn't have the time to write it until very late. And so if you'll allow me, I'm just gonna read what I have written down. And I imagine for you that was this huge moment of, oh no, I have to let them know that I failed this thing that I wanted to do. But what I observed in that moment, all of the, I think there's like 85 people there, every single person put down their phone and listened. And that's not something that's normal for like opening remarks of a meeting. People are like, oh, okay, here we go. We're going through the typical thing. Yeah, I'm just taking notes. You're like, no, you're not. Right. But everyone was paying attention. They were rapt because you started with this wonderful vulnerability and authenticity. And everyone's like, wait, you're not perfect. and what it did is it humanized you in this really, really powerful way that everyone could then relate to what you were saying. Because like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with things too. And that authenticity really helped build really cool connections in that moment. And that really stands out. And I know that, a lot of times people still have that image of you, right? Is you got everything under control. And I think taking these taking up the mantle of being the healer, the fixer for everybody, or having the image that people need to look to for comfort or safety. I think that's important. But also having these breaks of, let me let you know, it's not all perfect. Let me be honest with you, it's hard sometimes. And that's actually something that I deal with a lot. Me and Jamie deal with, is people are like, oh, you guys are the perfect couple. Like, we are not the perfect couple. Like, we fight a lot, and when we fight, sometimes it's ugly. And what happens afterwards? Well, we do our best to recover together. And like, when we share things on Facebook, we share the good things, like, we don't share, oh, just got in a big fight with my wife today. Oh, that was a doozy. We don't share those things, because those are private things. But I do think that there's tremendous benefit in occasionally just letting down the guard and being authentic, and letting folks know that, yes, I'm struggling with this too. And I think that that's why I was so moved by just the way that you opened this conversation, is because, oh, Nikki's having a hard time with this whole situation too. Now, the specifics of it, like, we may not align on the specifics of it, but given the gravity of everything around us, it makes me feel better when I struggle, knowing that you struggle occasionally too.
So a couple of important kind of points or filtering up as I was listening to you talk. Number one, the how is important. So how that authenticity and that vulnerability is another word that quickly follows on the heels of it. How that's shared is usually what trips leaders up, because there's a perception that in order to be vulnerable, in order to be authentic, I have to overshare. I have to become best friends with everybody I worked with, or I have to listen to all of their oversharing, whatever. And that's not what we're talking about, but it's choosing strategic moments of authenticity and appropriate moments. So for today, like, had I gone on for another 10 minutes about the specifics and the trials and the tribulation and whatever, that's not the point of this conversation. So it's kind of like knowing when to, like, dip your toe in the pool and then take it back out, in order to build that connection. And that, for me, is the distinction between sharing authentically and then oversharing for the sake of oversharing. And I think that gets confused in some places. You were talking about also, that kind of ongoing connection with people, what that does for other people, and that mantle of leadership, or that mantle of whatever the image is that you've created. It's okay for it to coexist. That, I think that is really a critical piece, that you can be both. You can have, this very authentic situation that you share and people learn from, or that you get support from. And you can still also, like, kick a lot of ass and do really great things. Like, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And that was the second point that really came through of, when you say, like, oh, like, she's struggling too, oh, I'm struggling, it creates this platform for connectivity. And if connection is one of the biggest building blocks of resilience, there's a lot of research around that, even having one primary connection. That's what, you've shared that before, that to be authentic in a way that allows other people to connect with you. I think there's something really, really powerful about that.
Yeah. That lends to this idea of perfection. And when I think about the image of perfection, and actually it's something that I struggle with a lot, and this goes to my graphics background, is, when I'm creating something, I've got this image of what it should be, as far as when is it done, when is it perfect. And oftentimes I will toil for hours trying to get something to line up, or something that I know should be possible, and I'll go on and research and figure out how to make it work. And what happens is the output, the video, the graphic, the whatever, it's only marginally better. And so I've gone through this tremendous outpouring of effort to create something that no one's going to even know that I had done. And so kind of the inauthenticity of it is, I put out this thing that I think is finally perfect, and I don't get the response of, wow, that's nice. That's nice. Like no, you have no idea what I went through. And what happens is I'm not actually being authentic with myself. And that's something that I think a lot about with this idea of striving for perfection. If we don't actually kind of get down to why are we striving for perfection, like what are we trying to solve with this, and we can't be authentic with ourselves, then we're going to continue doing things that are not productive or less productive.
Yes.
And this authenticity with self is a really deep and powerful concept. I think a lot about people who are trying to achieve some stated outcome. Someone would say, I want to connect with my team. So that's my stated outcome. I want to connect with my team. But then they behave in ways that are not commensurate with connecting with the team. They don't practice understanding. They don't practice listening. They don't practice empathy. They don't practice authenticity and vulnerability. They don't practice these things. And kind of the psychology behind that is, we behave in ways that give us what we truly want. And a lot of times we don't really know what we truly want. But for a lot of leaders, and forgive me if this touches too close to anyone, but a lot of leaders, they want, I'm going to try to say this the right way. They want to feel important. And that is what they truly want. And all of their behaviors are in line with being important or being seen as important. And so the stated outcome is, I want to connect with my team, but the real desire is to feel important. So the behaviors manifest as maybe trying to grab power or direct people or tell people or be critical of people. And so all the behaviors are around that. And if we take time to be authentic with ourselves and actually get down to that, I want to be important, then we can say, okay, this is what's really in there for me, is I'm feeling unimportant. I'm feeling unimportant. And I can start having conversations around that authentically with maybe not my subordinates, but with other people, and start working through that. And then I can say, oh, I guess I've got a lot of reasons to feel important already. Now I can get to the real stated outcome, is connecting with my team. And only when we kind of go beneath the surface within ourselves and be authentic with ourselves, can we start to move beyond some of these underlying desires.
So one of the exercises that I think is helpful for that, because that's one of those like says easy does hard.
Right.
Like, just get down to your real desire.
Let's
like
get down to the roots.
No problem. That can be really challenging for a lot of reasons, because we have to go through our own veneers or our own internal should structures or operating frameworks. But there's an exercise that we've adapted from the left-hand column exercise, which some people might be familiar with. And it's a way of going back through a conversation with somebody else and examining what you were actually really thinking or feeling. So it's a good way to kind of get in and kind of get inwards and understand what was going on, which I'm going to explain the exercise in a minute. I've also modified that for self-reflection to kind of even help me get through down to like, what do I truly want? What is the thing that I'm actually looking for? So 3 columns exercise. the original version is just called the left-hand column, and you start with a center column and you go back on a conversation that you had with somebody else. And in the center column goes line by line, like think bullet points. What I said, what they said, what I said or did, what they said or did. And you are just think of it as if you were a third party watching the two of you interact, and just bullet point out, very fact-based. This was actually said out loud. This was actually done. They threw the pencil across the boardroom, whatever it is. Center column. Now in the left column, you go back through and bullet point by bullet point, you go back through that center column and you ask yourself and you write down, what was I thinking or feeling, but not actually saying? What was I thinking or feeling, but not actually saying? And you do that to check your alignment. Are my behaviors, my actions, and my statements aligning with what I'm really feeling inside? And then the third column, this was the piece that you and I adapted for the purposes of illustrating empathy and helping people develop their empathy muscle, is in that third column, you go back through and you try to put yourself in the other person's position. What were they thinking or feeling, but not saying? And that can be really eye-opening, because there's some points where I've done that. I've gone back through and I'm like, well, I said this. And in my head, what I was thinking and feeling was, I'm right. Surely they're going to come around to my perspective at this point. And then when I went back through it from their part, I was like, they were probably feeling kind of shut down or attacked, or they probably thought I was kind of a jerk, as you go through it. So the modification for self-reflection is looking back. You can do it at part of a conversation if you want. I like to do it when I've taken an action and I'm not feeling good about something. So all of a sudden I'm drained at the end of a day. I'm in the shower in the morning and I'm like getting ready for the day and I'm like not looking forward to what I'm heading into, and delving into why. And then saying, okay, how am I actually feeling? That's like my center column. And then left-hand column, why? What are all these feelings? I feel apprehension, stress, sick to my stomach, excited, whatever it is. And then why? And then kind of trying to attach a why to each of those. Mm-hmm. And then in that third column, how did I end up here? What did I do something to create this? So if I have apprehension about this conversation, I have to have, what were the pieces of my behavior that led to it? So it's a little bit of a self-examination, but it gets to that heart of like really what's going on. And the last point I want to make before I let you talk again, because we've got these like long soliloquies going on today, it's amazing, is when you were talking about perfectionism, there was a quote I heard a month or two ago that has totally aided my self-exploration of where am I being authentic and where am I misaligned. And Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, she said, perfectionism is fear in better clothing. She actually called it the haute couture of fear. And I love it because anytime I start to run into perfectionism where I feel myself like, oh, this has to be it, or the pressure ratchets up and it doesn't really match what it should be for the situation, I ask myself that question, what am I actually afraid of? Mm-hmm. And then if it's valid, hell yeah, work on it.
Right.
If it's not valid, is it something I can let go?
Yeah.
Is it something I can let go of? And sometimes it will matter and sometimes it won't. And that's just been a very helpful filter for me to apply when I talk about really being authentic and certainly when dealing with perfectionism.
That's really beautiful. And you talked earlier about authentic communication, authentic connections between people. And one thing that's really powerful is doing that exercise, like you just said, about identifying, what am I running from? What am I afraid of? And then running that past someone that gets you, someone that understands you. Because a lot of times the way that we see the world is through the lens we've always looked through. And so fears seem more valid when we reevaluate them through our own lens, the lens that created the fear in the first place. And so if we run these fears past somebody else, they can give us some outside perspective and say, yeah, you should be afraid of that. or actually, you've got nothing to worry about here. You're already at level 11, you're already past where you need to be. And being authentic, having an authentic conversation with someone that understands you is really, really powerful.
And it shifts it from, because what's possible is you might have that conversation with someone and you get affirmation or validation or confirmation, whatever Asian you want, that you don't need to do the thing, like the thing that you feel like you have to do because it's whatever, and maybe you don't actually have to do the thing. Then you get to choose. I get to do the thing. I get to do the thing. And that will shift your whole energy around it. Like you and I always go back and forth when we're doing presentations together on the slides. Yeah. And we call it, Eric's gradient, where I'm like, it just needs to be green. And Eric's like, what shade of green? And I'm like, light green. It needs to be freaking light green. And then Eric's like, this light green, this light green, this light green, this light green, or this light green. And I'm like, they're literally like one gradient different. But to you, it's very important. And so the difference being, if you were operating, feeling all the time like, I have to change all the background graphics, I have to add this specific animation in, 20 times throughout the slide deck. And I say, I really don't think that's like make or break, which usually is my phrase for, I think it's a good idea, but I don't know that it like massively moves the needle. That puts you in the position of, if you want to put energy towards that, then you get to. But it alleviates the stress of, I have to. Because by sharing it, we've said, okay, the bar really needs to be here. If you want to go here and you have time and capacity, rock and roll. And I think that's a very loving thing to do for each other. And it's a very important exercise to do for yourself as well, of asking, is this really necessary? Is this, and sometimes the answer is yeah.
Yeah. And I think the power that, at least that I've gained from the gradient exercise, and peek behind the curtain, that is actually what we call it. We call it, is this Eric's gradient thing? When these sorts of things pop up. But what the real beauty behind it for me is, it eliminates the judgment of right or wrong. Because what we've identified is that Nicole wouldn't spend the time doing this thing because she doesn't see the value in spending the time. She's not saying there's no value in doing it, which is it's wonderful, because for me, when I'm doing, let's go back to doing a slide or something like that, I my first thought is, what do I want the audience to perceive? What I want them to feel when they're looking at this, or in the progression of things. And there's certain things that having this a little off is going to prevent them from getting that. And I'm like, oh, I got to fix that. And then the way that you've done that, Nicole, is you've eliminated me feeling bad for feeling passionate about something, because it's not wrong. It's just not what you would prefer to do. And that's a really powerful step, eliminating the judgment. I think there's a lot of folks that are unwilling to be authentic or vulnerable because of the fear of the judgment. And what you find with people you care about is that the more times you practice being authentic, the less likely you're going to be met with judgment. And that is a powerful place to be. And also, the more you practice being authentic with yourself, the less likely you are to judge yourself for that, or for these things that you're dealing with. And that's something that we could all use more of, is practice not judging ourselves, practice not judging our decisions, practice not judging, because this idea of right or wrong is this really, really powerful illusion that makes us feel pretty awful sometimes. And a lot of times there's not a real benefit to it.
And I love that we can have different ideas of right and wrong. Like, because I will tell you, I have never, ever done a presentation with you when whatever gradient difference that you've been working on in the wee hours of the morning right before my alarm goes off and you're still awake. I have never done a presentation and thought, gosh, I don't see the difference. I do see the differences, but it's just how I want to spend my time, and allowing you to have the space to do that. And one of the benefits of this, when you are authentic with the people around you, you find new ways of doing business. And you and I have shifted even how we work together to allow you space to do that. And you know what's important to me. If I don't get the work plan and the brain dump and the bullet point list of all the topics so we can start framing this stuff, which is where I initially lead, that makes me anxious or not feeling good. So we build that in. And then we build in enough time on the back end for you to do the gradient stuff that makes it really look phenomenal at the end, that I would never otherwise have thought of, but I see the final product and go, wow. And that to me is a pivotal point when you're considering whether or not authenticity is a strategy you want to employ in the workplace in order to improve how your team operates. Because that hands down is one of the outcomes. If you have a team member all of a sudden voice to you, the way that we've been doing this has actually always been really painful. And here's why. And you hear that and you go, oh, we could adjust that. That's how wonderful to have the space to know that. And it's sometimes challenging, to get people to give that authentic information. But those, like Eric mentioned, when you mentioned practicing over time and kind of giving people the opportunity to see that in action and sharing it yourself, that's going to build that capacity in your work team or in your, your family or your social circle.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I enjoy having a space where we can practice this stuff. And I don't know if everyone has that. One thing that I think has been really, really powerful is just knowing that I've got someone to trust with my authenticity and my vulnerability. And if you're out there and you're saying, great, Eric and Nicole, this stuff is really fantastic, but who do I practice with? Who do I trust with that? And you racking your brain, you can't find it. Just reach out to us. I mean, we're both very well practiced in listening for understanding. We're very well practiced in validating people's feelings and emotions without judging their outcomes or conclusions. And that's a really important practice. And maybe we'll talk about that in a future session, or future coffee and connection. But yeah, feel free to reach out to us, email or Facebook or whatever, because that's what we want to do for the world, to spend more time helping people be their best.
Yep, absolutely. So there's two kind of final thoughts I want to offer. One, when you are talking about how do we connect authentically, or how do we create an environment for that, or when people start to share, one of the things to watch out for in your own behavior is your urge to fix it or to respond with a solution, or a cheerleading is a really common one. These come from good places. I want to help. I want you to feel better. But really practice that on your own end too, of, I hear you on that. I totally hear you on that. And that's really, and then you move into sympathy or empathy, or ask them what they need. What would be most helpful or most supportive for me to offer to you right now? But most of the times I've ever been asked that question, which there aren't a ton, is I haven't thought that through myself. And so it's a really powerful place for me to go, oh, this is actually what I need. And sometimes it's very simple and I can do it myself. I don't need anything. I just needed to get it out. So watching out for that. And if I could offer Eric, you've talked about the Daily Delight Challenge and, kind of tuning your frequency to look for things that delight you. I would love to offer a connect authentically challenge.
Mm.
Where for the next week, 2 weeks, 2 days, whatever feels right to each of you, can you connect with someone and authentically share something that you've been thinking, good or bad, that you haven't shared yet outside your own head? And if you don't have someone you feel comfortable doing that with, can you do it with yourself in like a journal format? Or walk around the block and talk to yourself, you know, and if you're wearing a mask, no one will know that you're doing it anyway, so you're fine. But really the connect authentically for me would be taking some time and intentionally sharing even just one thing, good or bad, that you haven't shared with somebody else for the sake of practicing and building that skill set and that ability to do so. I think that would be, it has been for me very meaningful. That's something I've leaned into the last couple of days, mostly out of necessity. But for people that are interested in this concept, that's something that can help grow that capability for you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think I do owe you a dad joke, because we were going to do a dad joke a week.
I was hoping you'd get this part.
This is a good one. It's one of my favorite ones. Are you ready for it?
No.
Good. Doing it anyway. Okay. So there's this Scandinavian woman named Janice the Red and her husband Rudolph, and they were arguing back and forth on whether they needed an umbrella, and Rudolph kept saying, it's gonna rain. Grab the umbrella. It's gonna rain. And Janice was like, why? It's not gonna rain. Look at, there's no clouds in the sky. It's not gonna rain. Maybe there's some clouds, but it's not gonna rain. How do you know? And he turns to her and says, because Rudolph the Red knows rain, dear. You don't have to hold it in. You don't have to let that one out. Let that out.
I'm not even laughing at the joke. I'm laughing at you laughing at your own joke.
That's one of the best ones ever. Don't worry, I got a whole bunch of them.
Again, we have different gradients on your sense of humor. Oh man, always good to chat with you. For everybody out there, we are here to support. We're here to serve. If there's any way that we can do that for you, please let us know. And wishing you an authentically wonderful week.
And with that, keep connecting.
Keep connecting. It wasn't quite as smooth as last time. It was close.
The red-nosed reindeer. Do you get it?
Yeah, that's so lame.
The red. No, that's so good. That's a good one. That's a really good one.
I appreciate your self-affirmation.
I didn't make up the joke. I just told it.
Oh, man.
All right, dude. Talk to you later.
Take care.